did so far is today is an evolution introduction. So what we've done so far is we said, well, what evolution is, it is a list of, it is a change in inheritable traits, so things that you can get from your parents. And all behavior, so the ways that you act, if it's a change in the way a population acts. Now we've got this word population here. We're actually going to cover what that means today as well, and across generations. So that's the important thing here. It's actually over generations of time. So we said that what that means is that if you look at something like Pokemon evolution, this is not an evolution. This is because this is happening to one organism, whereas evolution has to happen over generations. Now, Pokemon evolution is obviously a fictitious example, but another real-world example is a caterpillar, not a sheep, turning into a butterfly, and that is called the metamorphosis. That is a change in an organism that, and yeah, sure, don't get me wrong, that organism looks very, very different, but it's not an evolution. It's not, and there are lots of traits that are changed, but it's not an evolution because it's happening to one organism. Now, if like, and yeah, whereas evolution happens over time, that's the main thing. Evolution is a very, very long process, okay? You don't just wake up and be able to breathe underwater. It takes like, and even if you did have a child that could breathe underwater, they probably wouldn't be able to breathe underwater well. They might be able to breathe a little bit underwater. It takes millions upon millions of years before that trait becomes like well enough established. We also talked about a giraffe gives birth to a baby with a longer neck. We said that this is an example of a hereditary trait. So over time, generation after generation, child after child, there eventually that trait is going to get more and more progressed. That neck is going to get longer and longer and longer. Okay, what else? Then we finished up the slide with this. I finished up this morning's lesson with this. When DNA replicates, sometimes it makes a mistake. These mistakes occur in your cells and can also occur when making sex cells. Some mutations or mistakes make no change whatsoever to the overall organism. There's actually no evidence. You could have mistakes in your body right now. You probably do have mistakes in your DNA, but because it's like doesn't make much of a difference, it doesn't matter. And if sometimes it makes a difference and it's a bad cell, another cell will come around and say, hey, you're misbehaving, and kill it. Sometimes these radical changes might get passed. These mutations can be good and sometimes they can be bad. And sometimes those mutations can get passed down to your children or offspring. And so if you like have a plant, and let's just say this plant for some reason makes pink flowers, if that plant makes seeds, then their flowers will also be pink, and then they will make, and maybe their offspring will have pink flowers, except for one flower, which is really random, it actually made a red flower instead of a pink flower. And then that will make more red flowers, and that random chance is a mutation. I actually want to expand on that in a second, but that's pretty much what we copied down last time. Let's actually watch this happen. What I did, and I did this over a couple of periods that I had off today because I wanted to make these slides look good, is I stole this. This is stolen from semester 1. This is our ideas of genetics. So here we've got our TTAGC. Guys probably like, oh yeah, I remember this slide. Hopefully you remember this slide. And so what we're going to do is we're going to unzip the genes like we did last time. But you'll notice when we unzip these genes, something went wrong. Instead of this down here being a T, which it should be, it became a G. And that can happen from time to time. You can actually get them changing from one thing to another. What that means is that when I then bring in the copy RNA, match those base pairs and I get this, I end up with this situation here. These two strands of DNA look almost identical, except there is a mutation. Now again, that mutation may do absolutely nothing. But that mutation might be the mutation that says, oh, I want the color of that person's left eye to be different from the color of the person's right eye. Or maybe it'll be like, I want that person, you know, instead this gene that's supposed to code for making your body be able to digest lactose, maybe suddenly now it can't digest lactose. Maybe it just completely ruins that protein that does the digesting of lactose. Maybe it completely ruins the protein that allows that person to get growth hormones. So because that protein can't produce growth hormones, that person might grow up to be with dwarfism or something like that. So yeah, mutations can be good, they can also be bad. So that's sort of just an example of how it might occur. That small little mistake could go on to reproduce and replicate and create an entirely a human being that's just completely different. But I guess what I wanted to talk about before I move on is I wanted to talk about, oh, sorry, I'm just going to do this. Ignore me for a second. I want you guys to write something down for this slide. I haven't got anything written here, so I'm going to have to write it down myself. But I want you guys to write down this. The idea is mutation chances. I want you guys not to be, I don't want you to think that, oh my God, every time a piece of DNA replicates, it's going to make a mutation. That's not the case. Mutations are essentially mutations. There is a chance of a mutation. It's not for certain. There is a chance, though low, I'd like you to write this down, that your DNA is replicated with a mutation. Now, it's also the point, and this is another point that I want to, this is another thing that I want to point out, is that mutation is also random. The mutation is also randomly chosen. So if you do mutate, let's just say, as a dumb example, let's just say you really want to breathe underwater and you get told, oh, don't worry, your child's got a mutation. That doesn't mean that you can choose that mutation. That your child might instead just catch fire randomly, which is not actually a thing. But yeah, you may get another mutation that's not the one that you expect. A lot of people think, oh, you know, obviously this humans evolved to have less hair. That must have been a choice that they made because they were, you know, spending more time. They were spending less time in cold climates or something like that. It's like, no, that's not how a mutation works. It's just randomly, you know, that mutation showed up in one particular human, and then it got over millions of years because that person had children. It just got more and more and more produced. It's like that thing. It's like, well, eventually a fish evolved to have lungs, but that doesn't mean that, oh, the fish must have wanted to evolve lungs. It was completely random. It just so happened that that one particular fish grew lungs. But I guess that's, for me, what is important to understand here. It's completely random. Mutation is completely random. You have no choice. And it's sort of like, as well, if you ever watched X-Men or any of those other shows where they get random superpowers, you don't get a choice in what superpower you get. You don't get to go, oh man, I want to be able to fly. it just randomly pops up that you get this particular superpower. So, and that's exactly the same sort of thing. It's like you just randomly just get a random DNA. You just randomly can get a mutation. You have no choice in or say in what you get. Questions about this slide? I think I said the word random like 20 times just then. But yeah. Let's keep going. So I've got one key idea that I want to get to at the end. So we've got this idea that and on this next slide is a bit out of order, and I get that, and it's a bit annoying, but I'm just going to go back. But I'm going to need to have this piece of information to explain things further on. I want to quickly talk to you guys about this word population. So we talked about this word near the start. We said, oh, well, you know, we said the definition of the definition of evolution is a change in a population. So it's really important that I just quickly touch on what the difference between a population and an organism is, just so that you've got this in your back pocket, because the word population is going to get used a lot. What do you guys think the missing word is? A large population is a large group of something type of organism. What do you guys think it is? Who wants to take a guess? Species? No, it's not species. Large group of, actually it's technically two words, but that's fine. The word here is a large group of the same type of organism. And that's, if you look at this picture on the top right, we've got a large population of, in this case, penguins. You can have a population of ants, which means you've got lots of different ants. You can have a population of humans, because you've got a large group of humans in one area. But that's what we mean by population. Whereas a community is many different types of organism living in a habitat. And the reason we do that is because when we talk about evolution, we talk about a species evolving, or one type of animal evolving. Whereas when we talk about a community, communities don't evolve because they're lots of different organisms there. This is also important to discuss this idea that, species. A population doesn't mean every single, like if I had a population, doesn't mean every single, what am I going to say, sparrow in the world. You've got sparrows, it might be a bunch of sparrows in Australia and a bunch of sparrows in America and a bunch of sparrows in the United Kingdom. Those are what we call, when we refer to population, we refer to a single population in an area, not everywhere. So that's what I want you to think about. Does that make sense? Does that, the difference between population and species, make sense? I hope so. I'm going to assume this is someone saying yes or no. Yeah, okay, cool. So yeah, populations, like, yeah, you can have a population of rats in a particular suburb. You can have a different population of rats in a different suburb. Even though they're the same species, they're both rats, they're just in different suburbs. But that does lead us to this problem here. Before we get into the problem, you don't need to copy these down, but this is some slides that this was in your book, and they spent like a lot of time going through this in your book, and I'm like, no, I'm just going to show them one picture, and that's going to be perfect. So here we can see our organism. This is just a single rat, maybe, I don't know what the hell that is. I don't know. I'm going to call it is it a meerkat? I don't know. Maybe it's a meerkat. Might be a mole. Take your guesses, ladies and gents. No idea. But a population, an organism is just one of them. That's the trick. It's just one of these organisms. It's not a dog. And survival and reproduction of a unit of natural selection. Whereas a population is more than one. Whereas a community is among different populations. So you've got here, you can see you've got a bunch of these moles, but you've also got these plants as well. And you've also got these other animals. So you've got lots of different things. An ecosystem is how everything interacts. It's the movement of nutrients. It's also, so you can see when we add weather, we add how these things eat different things, and so on and so forth. And this leads to, of course, the biosphere, which is absolutely everything in the world. Honestly, we only need to care up to about this point here, the ecosystem point. But yeah, the idea is that a population is just a group of the same type of animals, a group of these moles, whereas a community is also other things involved. And an ecosystem is also other things involved and the environment as well. So when we talk about all of these things, we're going to be talking about how all these ideas interact. And so that's going to be our big ploy, especially with evolution, because believe it or not, the weather and the energy on the terrain and where you live is going to affect how you evolve as well. So that's something we need to pay attention to. The other thing they had a lot in your textbook, which was this. This is going the other way. So an organism is made up of organ systems, like your digestive system, like your circulatory system. Again, you don't have to write this down. I just want to make sure that I've covered this. Whereas nervous system. And those systems are made up of individual organs, like your heart, your lungs, your stomach. Sometimes those systems might be used in more than one, those organs may be used in more than one system. Like your brain is used in a couple of different systems. How do you get those organs? You make them from tissues. And how do you make those tissues? You make them from cells. This was a year 8 concept, I think. So yeah, this is how all of these come together. So now we've got an idea of how these sort of link together. We've got this population is the same type of organism. A community is more of that type of organism interacting with other things. An ecosystem is with the environment. An organism is made up of organ systems, like digestive system, which is made up of organs, just made up of tissues, which is made up of cells, which is controlled by DNA. So the last two, I've got 3 ideas left, and then I'm done for the day. What time have I got? I've got 15 minutes left, so I've got 5 minutes per slide. So let's power through them, and then we're going to be done. And I'll be very happy that I've covered everything. So let's talk about this. This is supposed to be a possum here, right? This is actually straight from your textbook, but I wanted to go through it with you guys. There's another pencil joke here as well, if you guys get it. 10 points. How many? Okay, we've got this one possum, and this possum has 3 children, or they have 3 descendants. So maybe these are not just their children, but their children's 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 children. I want to know, how are these possums the same, and how are they different? And then what I want to do is I want to give reasons for why they might be different. So we're going to start off with the easy one here. I'm going to open up chat because I would love you guys to let me know. Can you guys tell me, this is the easy one, What is something that all of these possums have in common? I say easy, but sometimes this can be a bit challenging because you look at the differences so much, it's hard to see. They all have eyes. So this is like some good things. They all have eyes, not just eyes, but blue eyes. Yep. They all have fur. What's some other things they've all got? They all feet. Yep, feet. They all have a tail. All of these things are really good. Ears. Yep, let's add ears. And you could go noses, and sometimes these are actually, yeah, I'm gonna stop there, but yeah, because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I could do math. Do math, why not? And it might seem obvious, but sometimes it's really hard to look at the things that are the same. They all have a mouth, but they all have ears, they all have a tail, but sometimes they're different. So let's talk now about the differences. Let's talk now. I'm going to go with blue for this one on the left. Can you guys tell me what's the difference between this and its parent, or maybe this and its sibling, its other ones? What's something that's different here with this blue one? No spots. That is definitely a point. There are no spots on that one. Is there another one? Small eyes. Let's get 2 more differences. Big ears. Yeah, let's go big ears. And anything else? Any other differences? Big paw. Yeah, sure. Not as big as, but yeah, we could go with that. I was gonna say its tail looks fluffier, but I don't know. Yeah, I feel like the tail is important, but yeah. Whereas now let's grab a look at the second one. Maybe we'll only do 2 because I'm not sure if I can be bothered. Oh, you know what? Maybe we'll do all 3, but we'll cut the very, very last. I think that we don't need that very last slide anyway. Let's look at the second one anyway. So let's grab a look at in orange, red. Can you guys tell me for this one here, what are some of the different traits for this one in red? This one in red has big eyes. It's got really big eyes in comparison. What else? What else has it got? Tail is small. It's a thin sort of tail. What about its feet? What about its feet? Anything about its feet that you can tell me? This one's got no spots either. Is that it, guys? Okay, what about this one in what about this last one? You can tell me some of the differences. One of them is thick. What do you mean by thick? Is this one thick? Is in this one's fat? Do you remember about the No, what do you mean? Small eyes, yep, this one's got small eyes. What else? It's got spots, whereas siblings don't have spots, or it's maybe not siblings but other descendants. It's got a long tail. That's also fluffy, yeah. So all of these, it's got small ears too, yeah, I like that. So all of these sort of creatures have got different modifications. They've got different attributes that have been expressed. A lot of these attributes have changed from its parent. If you look at the like two of them have lost their spots that their parent had. Two of them have lost their eyes that their parent had. And there are a lot of these alterations that have gone on. So what I wanted to do now is I wanted to talk about this. Well, let's look at this blue one. Let's look at, I think the easiest one is this red one here. What reasons are there for these differences? Why do you think this particular one, the red one here, why do you think it's got big eyes for? And why do you think it hasn't got a bushy tail anymore? He's on drugs. Okay, great. Why has he got big eyes aside from being on drugs? Or can someone tell me, why do you think that his tail is, yeah, that's a reason why. His genes are different, that's correct. But why would that benefit? Well, actually, maybe that's the whole point. No, I think that's not. I would like to talk about this. He sees in the dark. That's sort of what I'm like thinking. I reckon you got it, Brendan. Took you a couple, but I reckon that's correct. I reckon this middle one is now nocturnal, because I reckon that so he can see in the dark, because that's why it needs to have big eyes. But also, I think with this small tail is now, in my opinion, useful, because I reckon this one lives in trees. Well, how the heck did you come up with that, Mr. Greer? Well, look, two reasons. One, these claws are a lot bigger than any of his neighbors, and this tail makes it look like that you could hang on to stuff. That's why I think that this one lives in a tree, because it's probably more likely to. What reasons are there for these differences? Because of these. And what caused these differences? Well, I reckon the two causes are technically the genes, but the other big change, what caused it, is I think also the habitat. Maybe now this particular version of the possum lives in a more tree-rich area, and so therefore needs to have and goes out hunting at night, so needs to have big eyes. Whereas something like, I don't know, the blue one doesn't. Looking at that blue one's got big ears, so maybe it needs to be careful because of that. I don't know. I'm at a bit of a loss for the other ones. But yeah. But yeah, the general idea is that I think I wanted to get to is that each of these offspring have modifications of their parent. And this is going to be the last big idea that I'm going to get you guys to write down. Yes, before Samir says, you know, that the bell's going to go soon. I'm going to quickly announce that this will be the last slide that I go through, is the next one here. So the idea, and this is pretty much the idea that I wanted to get to, it's Luca. Now, Luca is not a person, but if evolution causes us to be modified versions of our parents, that's the idea that, you know, if you looked at those possums, the children of the possum were slightly different from the parent. You know, sometimes they had bigger eyes, small eyes, longer ears. So we're all modifications, but the theory goes, all species are a branch off a branch, e.g. all four-legged animals are related at some point. The idea is that, yeah, sure, all of those, sorry, I'm going to go back for a second. All of these animals, these are all very, very different from each other, but they all came from one ancestor. They all came from one parent. They've just changed over time. So the theory is that all of them are branched to something, e.g., all four-legged animals are related at some point. All trees and plants are related at some point. All fungi are related at some point. And the theory goes that if all of them are related to some point, it's just as time went on, evolution made them look different. This sort of suggests, evolution suggests, we are all a descendant from one common ancestor, or what we know as LUCA, the last universal common ancestor. Now, this has got, is a lot of arguments in science about what does that common ancestor look like, and there's a lot of ways that they're trying to, because obviously there is no fossil record of it, and there's been a lot of analysis of genetics and looking at what genes are similar. Like there are genes in humans, this might rock your world, there are genes in humans that are the same in plants. Like there are parts of our DNA that you can look at in a human being and you can find those same genetics in a onion. And so therefore a human and an onion were related at some point, very, 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 very far in the past, but at some point we had a common ancestor. Yeah, so that's the theory, at least anyway. So everything was at one point related back in the day, and that point is called LUCA. And so the idea is that common ancestor millions of years ago, well, it had children, and two of the offspring were different, and then one of that different offspring had more different offspring, and then that offspring had more different offspring, and eventually those offspring were so different that one of them got the name onion and one of them got the name, human. That's the idea. And essentially the idea is that over time, eventually one day, humans could split off into, and when I'm talking about one day, I'm talking about millions upon millions of years, humans could split off into different evolutions. You could have and you could end up with two different types of humans, because that's what evolving means, is that you change, a population changes. Now, the best way for something to evolve like that would be if we had, if we had humans on Mars and there was a separate population of humans, the humans on Earth, over a long enough time, they may evolve differently. They may evolve to have longer legs or something like that. But yeah, that's what LUCA sort of says. And this is what, ultimately, I'm not going to go through the last slide, but this is what the last slide talks about. The last slide is just, this is what Charles Darwin said. He used the word descent with modification. As you have more and more children, they change slightly. That is now 3:05. I'm happy calling it here. If you've copied down this slide, you can finish up.